Well, at the center of Paris, near the Seine River, stands the Cathedral of Notre Dame. It was the most popular tourist site in Paris, second only to the Eiffel Tower. It has also been a place of faith for 900 years. The building of the cathedral began in the year 1163, and it was not completed until the year 1345, 182 years later. When the building was begun, the people of the church knew that the building would not be completed in their own lifetime. And yet, they persisted, even though they knew that they would never see the complete construction. The generations which followed also persisted in the construction, even though they too would not see the end. That kind of persistence requires dedication, commitment, and self-sacrifice. The people knew that there was something beyond themselves that was vitally important. They wanted to provide for their children and their grandchildren. They knew that future generations were counting on them not just to have a building, but to keep the faith alive. They knew that God was counting on them to keep the faith alive as well. At the end of today's gospel lesson, Jesus asked the question, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? The people who planned and worked to build the Cathedral of Notre Dame wanted to make sure that they could answer that question in the positive. When Jesus returned to earth, they wanted to make sure that he would find faith on earth, whether it was in their time or their grandchildren's time or beyond that. That is the same thought, the same purpose that is in mind when we talk about church renewal today. And of course, when we talk about the church, I'm not talking about a building like the Cathedral of Notre Dame, but rather the community of the faithful. The church is the people of faith in God and disciples of Jesus Christ. Renewing and revitalizing the church is important so we can make sure that when Jesus returns to earth, he will find faith on earth. But perhaps even closer to our hearts is providing a place and people of worship so that our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren's generation may come to know the love of God and the saving power of God's grace. We have a responsibility to God and to future generations to keep the faith alive and present now and forever. The generations before us knew this responsibility and were committed to seeing that we would know God's love and grace. And we have many people to thank for keeping the essence of our faith alive through good and hard times. They labored and sacrificed for their children and us, so we would have the good news from God. Looking back at what the church was like in previous generations, we can see that there has been many incarnations of what being the church was. The first Christians gathered in people's homes, or they met in the catacombs, underground tombs. They were persecuted. Being a Christian at that time meant torture and death if you were found out. Then in 312 AD, the Emperor Constantine became the Roman emperor of the whole empire, and he made Christianity the state religion. The church became an institution, and churches became massive buildings, and people had different issues and problems to contend with in their new political reality. The Roman Empire fell in the 5th century, and Christianity survived through small-town worship and missionaries who converted pagan populations. The Dark Ages then became the Middle Ages, and the Christian church was the dominant institution throughout Europe. And woe to the person who had a different belief or opinion from the church. People were tortured for being anything different from the established order. And then came the Protestant Reformation with a whole lot of new ideas on what the church should be. There were Lutherans and Reformed, Baptists and Methodists, Congregationalists and Presbyterians, and more. In America, there have been 3 waves of religious revival and enthusiasm called the Great Awakenings, which occurred in the 18th and 19th centuries. Each of these Great Awakenings was characterized by widespread revivals, a sharp increase in interest in religion, a renewed sense of deep faith conviction, and an increase in church membership. The church has had to deal with the changing political and social realities of their times. There were wars and rumors of wars. There were times of disease and famine. There were times of prosperity and times of depression. Through all these changing circumstances, the church has had to reinvent itself and become something different than what it was before in order to survive. The church is not a given in this world. Although it may seem widespread and permanent, it is not. People have had to work hard to keep the faith alive, and all have to work at keeping the faith alive and making the church accessible to the people of the time and place in which they live. And most churches, through all the changing circumstances of time and place, have retained the vital essence of what the church should be and its core message to the world. Scripture says that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. God is the same because God always loves us, and God's grace is free to all who accept it. That does not change. People may change. Social, political, and economic situations may change. But God is constant. God is our northern star by which we can securely guide our lives. Today, as in times past, we look to God, our northern star, to guide us into the future. We look to keep what is essential to our faith as we cope with the circumstances of the church in the 21st century. Now, this past year, I've attended several workshops and programs on church renewal. And in 3 of these programs, I have heard one of the most recognized and respected voices for church renewal. That's Reverend Mike Piazza. Reverend Piazza, among with other experts, told us that we are living in the 4th great awakening of faith, revival, and renewal in American history. In other words, we are in a time of transition for the church. We are living in a time when the pace of life is accelerating. Fundamentalism and extremism is widespread. The family structure is changing. The middle class is crumbling. The world's climate is changing. And even with all the social media and communication devices we have, people are more lonely than ever. These are some of the issues facing us in our time. The church will still be the voice and hands of God. We can still be the messenger of God's love and grace, but our churches need to adapt. Reverend Piazza said that we need to be midwives for this new awakening. We need to help birth what the church is to become. The golden age of the church of the 1950s is not coming back. We have to reinvent our church. Not replace it, not destroy it, but renew and reinvent it for the 21st century. We have to do church in a new day, in a new way. When I first became ordained and started pastoring in the church over 27 years ago, I thought my ministry would be doing Sunday worship, baptizing babies, marrying people, burying people, visiting them in the hospital. I knew what to expect. But as I soon learned that things were not going to be like I expected. The old tried and true ways were not working. And I had to work harder. I had to work in different ways. I had to adjust my thinking, my attitudes, my work. People react differently to change, which they could somehow sense, but could not quite put their finger on what it was or what to do about it. And like any time of transition, there are those who want to dig their heels in and keep things just the way they have been. They might say something like, it's always been this way, it has always worked, change is a mistake. They believe that if they just hold on tight enough, that all the winds of change will pass and everything will be just like it was. And then there are those who want to radically change everything. They say, well, the churches die. The mistake, is doing things as we've always done them. The problem for these people is that they have the real tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater and to lose the essence of what the church really is. We need to conserve our essential values and capacities, keep what is critical and vital, and adapt everything else. In the book of Revelation, God says, "Behold, I make all things new." Please note that God does not say, I make all new things. I make all things new. God reinvents all things. We need to make all things new. We need to reinvent the church. Now, some in the church think that doing the same old thing will bring people back. But what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing with the same people and expecting different results. It is insane to expect people to come back to church by doing the same old thing. Think about Montgomery Ward, Blockbuster, Kodak, Woolworth. These were stores which failed, long history, hundreds of years, but they failed because they failed to reinvent themselves in the new time. We don't want this to happen to the church. But we cannot make change for change's sake. Reverend Piazza said that there are many churches, for example, in their desperation to save the church, they formed praise bands in order to attract people, and they wondered why no one came. Well, they missed the mark, according to Mike Piazza. They said because they focused on the expression of faith instead of the faith itself. What is important is not really the way we express our faith and worship, but the true vitality of the Spirit. People are not attracted because we sing. They are attracted because they can see our vital faith when we sing, or greet them, or visit them, or when we work with them on a project or do ministry with them. As it has always been, it is not what is out there that really matters. It's what's in here that really matters. This is where we have to start. More than flash, more than drama, special effects, popular music, or the like, is the integrity and honesty of our faith that moves and attracts people. If we want a vital church, we must revitalize our faith. We need to create a vibrant vintage church, keeping the essential qualities of the past and reinventing the church for the current times. It is even possible that we will just do what we are doing with more enthusiasm and passion. We need to let the Spirit of God live within and among us. We need to show God's love to the community so others will see that God's love and grace are here for the taking. There's a story which comes from Appalachia concerning the construction of a new dam deep within the mountains to provide electricity and water for a large community. All the residents in the area where the dam would be located volunteered to take the buyout, to leave their homes, and to take up residence in new modern homes. All but one family. Bulldozers and construction vehicles arrived, and the builders were ready to start clearing the land. But the one family met them with shotguns and a stubborn determination that they were not going to move come hell or high water. The head builder tried to negotiate with him, but met with nothing but resistance and threats, and he gave some threats in return. There was no way that this family could be left alone. The water would, without a doubt, come and cover their land and their cabin. A social worker was asked to talk with the family. Social worker was allowed by the family to enter their cabin and to talk, and for an hour there was no word. Then the social worker appeared outside the cabin, ordering a large cast iron kettle be brought into the cabin. And after a short while, the family emerged with their belongings and the cast iron kettle filled with a slow burning fire in it. The family was then willingly led to their new home. When asked what had happened, the social worker explained that the family had kept the fire in their cabin burning for over 100 years. When their grandfather, the grandfather of the eldest family member, had built the cabin and had started the fire in the fireplace. The family had promised to not let grandfather's fire go out no matter what it took. The social worker convinced the family that they could take grandfather's fire with them and could keep it going in their new home. The family saw a way that they could both keep their sacred tradition alive and be part of the modern world. And that's what we must do as well. We must keep the essential part of our faith as we move into the 21st century. We must take the essential faith of our ancestors and carried into a new age by reinventing the church to address the issues and concerns of this new age. And that is not a betrayal of our past, but rather it is making sure that the fire of God's Spirit will live on. And when Christ returns, we will be certain that he will find faith on earth. Amen.